Disclaimer: the following commentary is heavily revolved around the subject of death, and so my tone this time around will be much more serious and formal than usual. I want to ensure I talk about this topic as respectfully as I can. It is not my intent to make anyone uncomfortable here. I am simply here to commentate and entertain. I ask that you reciprocate the respect I'm giving here. If death is upsetting for you, I advise that you click away from this video. Thank you. Hey guys, Space Guru 5 here. I don't think I'll turn many heads when I say I'm a fan of CGP Grey's content. I think he is a great mix of informative and entertaining, much like Vsauce, SciShow, Minute Physics, and Numberphile. However, despite this, I do have my occasional disagreements with what Grey is talking about. One such disagreement is in his video titled Why Die, where he questions the idea of death and purports the notion of immortality and what he views as our current death acceptance. What do I have to say about this? Well, we ain't getting any younger, just waiting here to find out. Let's tune in and start slicing away. I'm gonna go ahead and skip the first 30 seconds, cause I don't have anything to say really.
Because the Reaper comes for all eventually, humans have formed a relationship with death perverse. Like a hostage who grows to love their kidnapper, humans tell themselves the handful of decades the Reaper gives them is just the right length, that living a truly long and healthy life would get boring and would be unnatural, and imagine all the problems if death took a holiday.
So let me get this straight. You're equating the acceptance of the inevitability of death with Stockholm Syndrome. Not only is that an irrelevant analogy, but it also makes no sense. I get what you're trying to do here. You're advocating for longer human lifespans, which is perfectly fine, honestly. But I think you're overstating your case by making this comparison. It sounds like you think humans are foolish to accept their given life expectancy, but this just isn't the case. While people do have life expectancy given at birth, this is by no means set in stone. A number of factors can change this, such as quality of life, environment, disease, and genetics. Heck, even the very act of aging changes your life expectancy. Here's a chart showing my estimated life expectancy as of 13th of July 2019, as provided by the official US Social Security Administration website, projected into my 60s and early 70s. This of course only considers average life expectancies based solely upon age and gender, and it also assumes I'll still be alive in the 2060s, which nobody knows yet. But you can see the numbers changing for both additional life expectancy and estimated total years alive. I should also mention that the life expectancy at birth for male babies born in 1997, which includes me, was 73.6 years, so you can even see this number has changed. This won't be the last strange analogy made in this video, just a heads up people. Also, I noticed that in this video you don't address those problems if death took a holiday, such as overpopulation, which is already a huge concern even without the question of immortality. Instead, you opted to discuss if we could become immortal as opposed to if we should become immortal. This isn't a huge flaw in your video, but I definitely found it to be noticeable.
And so, the Reaper of Age whispers that he is your friend, always near, growing humans bigger, stronger, healthier, and smarter. At first, then comes his harvest of slow rot. Death is a part of life, he whispers. Death gives life meaning. This is madness. Misery doesn't give happiness meaning. Happiness is meaning itself. If you tortured people to make them better appreciate the pleasures of life, you would be a monster, just like this guy.
The main reason death gives life meaning is because death is the cessation of life. Our time alive is limited, and we don't know when we will die, and so it makes sense to make the most out of life while you still have the chance. If you take away death, it'll just be way easier to take life for granted because you know your life won't end, so what's the point of worrying about it? This analogy I made comparing life and death to misery and happiness is irrelevant because death ends life, while misery is the complete absence of happiness. But happiness can return if it is taken away. Meanwhile, death is permanent. Once you're dead, you just can't come back to life. That's just how it is, man.
No parent would ask the Reaper of Age to wrinkle their child's skin, weaken their bones, dim their vision and their minds, cripple them in 1,000 ways over decades to ultimately kill them, to give their life meaning. But what can you do? The world contains pain and death, and so your brain believes the sweet lies that the horrors you can't avoid are good for you.
Thing is, there's a stark contrast between normal aging and degenerative diseases. Yes, it's normal for vision to dim, muscle and bone strength to slowly atrophy, and for cognitive function to decrease in old age. But that's way different than, for example, blindness, osteoporosis, and dementia, especially Alzheimer's. I'm not saying you're specifically referring to those kinds of diseases, but the way you've exaggerated the process of normal aging makes it really easy for me to interpret your words in this way. Nobody wants to deal with degenerative disease any more than they want to deal with any other disease. If they were truly good for us, they wouldn't even be called diseases in the first place. Furthermore, nobody thinks aging is really good for us, per se. It's just a thing that occurs naturally as we get older. You can avoid degenerative disease, but you cannot avoid senescence. My intent is to explain why as we go further along here, so please, just bear with me, people.
And while death is a part of life, cholera was a part of life until humans developed wells and sewers to separate water from waste. Short-sightedness is a part of life until it isn't. Just because a thing is natural doesn't make it good or necessary. It's natural to live lives nasty, brutish, and short, and it's natural for humans to look at what indifferent nature provides as the starting point, as a to-do list.
While it's true that natural things aren't automatically beneficial for humanity, it doesn't apply all across the board. If you must treat the relationship with humanity and nature as symbiotic, then you need to understand that there are different types of symbiosis. Symbiosis can either be competitive, where both organisms are at odds against each other, parasitic, where one organism's benefit is detrimental to another organism, amensal, where one organism's detriment has no effect on another organism, neutral, where neither organism is affected, commensal, where one organism's benefit has no effect on the other organism, or mutualistic, where both organisms benefit. However, when it comes to death, it's much more complex than this. Death has a number of causes, including traumatic injury, disease, and, well, senescence. In humans, cells die because they are unable to divide due to the depletion of telomeres over many cell divisions. Senescence is when more and more cells like this accumulate in the human body, which naturally causes organ failure and eventual natural death. Basically, it's a natural process that results in death and is simply the act of aging, not a disease. While it's not necessarily good for us, as I said earlier, it's something that is inevitable. Pretending otherwise is an optimistic delusion fueled by the unachievable fantasy of eternal life. People have tried and failed for millennia to find the key to immortality, and in those cases they often made their lives shorter. So, why would it work now? I'd prefer if you didn't compare aging with disease, as they are by no means one and the same.
Where humans focus, technology ever improves, and with that, the ability to make lives better ever improves. And just now, some basic tools with real promise to slow or halt the decay are becoming visible on the horizon, which raises the question, just how strong is the Reaper of Age? With enough time and attention, can humans craft these basic tools into shields and swords to keep him at bay? Possibly indefinitely? Perhaps. And if so, the first immortal generation may be alive today. A generation that lives a healthy adulthood as long as they wish to.
And here's where I have the biggest problem. Sure, we may be able to extend the human lifespan by a certain amount using the tools of science. In fact, scientists have recently been able to reverse some aspects of aging in certain mice. However, my biggest issue is your assertion that humans could potentially live forever. For one thing, mice and humans are not the same species. Well, obviously. There are treatments that are effective on mice that are not so effective or even detrimental to humans. In fact, even after animal studies suggest that a treatment will be safe and effective, more than 80% of potential therapeutics fail when tested in people, thus making it unlikely the finding I mentioned earlier will readily apply to humans. Although it is possible, so don't think I'm ruling it out. Barring that, let's talk about a key point that is usually ignored in discussions about immortality. That being, immortality is not the same thing as invincibility. Immortality means you can't die, while invincibility means you can't be harmed. Think of it like this. The longer a life is, the more chances there are of actual harm. You must also consider organs that cannot replenish themselves and or accumulate damage over time, such as the teeth or human DNA or even the skin. How can you account for many, many years of radiation acting upon the human body? What are the odds of you maintaining your dental hygiene for centuries or even millennia? Given a long enough time, those probabilities tend towards 0. Any higher than that and you would be postulating the chance of accumulating no gradual damage whatsoever, which is impossible. Here's the big kicker for me though. If you assume humans will figure out how to live forever, you have to assume humans could develop technologies that would 1. Guarantee that nothing in the universe could ever kill them, and 2. Stop any unaging whatsoever, thus bringing senescence to a complete standstill. Both of these are impossible. For one, you would have to ensure humanity could survive the heat death of the universe, since that's a finite time away and immortality would mean living infinitely. The heat death of the universe will occur due to the increase of entropy, which cannot be halted or reversed without violating the second law of thermodynamics, and science has shown that absolutely nothing could survive that event. For 2, scientists have actually found senescence to be inevitable, despite being delayable, and thus it cannot be stopped completely. The evidence is clear, people. Eternal life without death is nothing more than a pipe dream.
And how soon we start the project of focusing our attention and shaping our tools against the Reaper matters. For the difference of but a day might determine what side of the future chasm you find yourself on, journeying forever forward or falling backward into the abyss.
Except for when the heat death of the universe occurs, in which even the theoretically immortal will fall prey to maximum entropy. Here's hoping humanity will face the overpopulation problem before then. And that's the way this Roadrunner runs. As I said before, I tend to enjoy Grey's content, and to be honest, this is one of very few videos of his that I've completely disagreed with. While I am one for using technology to increase human lifespan, which I guess you can consider an outcropping of realistic transhumanism if you want to use that terminology, Grey falls prey to the optimism of eternal life without death in this video. Science has already thoroughly dismissed the possibility of immortality, so at this point, the best we can do is try to extend human life as long as possible. Even Professor David Sinclair, director of the Paul F. Glenn Center for the Biology of Aging, once said, "The public finds it very difficult to distinguish science from fake science right now. As the field grows, with interest from the lay public and investors in the media, we want to make sure the conversation stays evidence-based." Anti-aging research is serious and scientific, and the public needs to understand what's actually true about it instead of pseudoscience marketed by the media and some of popular science. I'm by no means a professional scientist, but you don't have to be one to advocate for wider knowledge of truth. You just have to be in constant pursuit of the truth. Death has always been a mercurial aspect of humanity, mainly because of how permanent and unexpected it is. We can only ever know when our time alive will end once we get to the end, whenever that will be. However, I believe the last thing we should do is panic over it or try to fight against it. As I've stated before, death is a reminder that we won't be around forever, and we only have one chance to make something of ourselves and our world while we still are around. Yes, there's going to be a lot of pain in life. You may endure personal hardships. You may lose loved ones. You may experience traumatic experiences and be haunted by them for the rest of your life. However, none of these things should impede our growth. We must move on from tragedy and carry its lessons with us. It'll never be easy, no matter how much you do it. But I think it'll be worthwhile if you persevere through it all and conquer that pain. It's up to us to decide what we should do with all of it. That's about it for today, folks. I'm Space Guru 5, and as always, take care.
Here I lie on my deathbed, recalling things said as my world slips away.